pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Captain, oh, my captain, farewell.
Yeah, Patrice Bernier's final game goes on Sunday. Final game of a career, 38 years old. Patrice Bernier started a long time ago. He's one of the originals back in the early days of sort of the online culture when a lot of Canadian, and I'm sure Montreal would go the same way, but I'm speaking more from the Canadian perspective and the national team perspective. When we first got to know each other, he was one of those names that we were all excited about and talked about a lot. So it's kind of a bit of a strange feeling for me as someone who's been, living in those online communities for a long time to see one of those originals, the last of those originals, because at that time we were talking about guys like Duane de Rosario and Julian de Guzman and things like that as well. So this is the last of the original first generation Voyager online culture kind of guys to go to retire. And that's kind of a sad thing. Makes me feel old, Kevin, but I'm sure Patrice feels old as well. And those in Montreal have even greater memories of him, of course.
A player that started his career, like you mentioned, his professional career, senior level, in 2000 with the Montreal Impact, 2001, 2002 as well. 73 games for the Montreal Impact in the early history of the Montreal Impact. That did start in 1993 and got a championship in 94 and 99 and 2004 and 2009. Those are the year of championship of the Montreal Impact. Yes, I know them off the top of my head, of course. But that's maybe one of the biggest disappointments of Patrice Bernier's Montreal Impact career was never able to win a trophy of that magnitude. He has won some Canadian championship, MVP for the club with the Impact, but just when you had a good moments as well in different MLS years, and we'll go through his career. I just want to start, Duane, by going through his international career as well. I mean, European career. He had a very decent one in the 2000s when not a lot of Canadian players were getting opportunity, never mind starting opportunities, never mind being heroes and player of the year for FC Nordsjælland during his tenure there. He became a supporter's favorite, a cult almost supporter's favorite for that club. Let's start with his beginning in Europe. It was very humble beginning for him in Europe. He is one of those examples, Duane, of a player that makes a name for himself, just knows a bit of people. He knows Rob Friend, goes with Rob Friend with Moss FK, and it wasn't necessarily turned out the best, but he made the name for himself, got noticed by Tromsø after. So after Moss FK in 2003-2004, Tromsø in the Tippeligaen in Denmark, 2004-2007, he made a name for himself. Tromsø wanted to keep him at the end as well. They offered more money. Come on, Patrice, stay with us. But Patrice wanted to play for a better league, in a better league, wanted to continue his journey up the pyramid of soccer, of football, European football, the hierarchy, and he wanted to try himself in the Bundesliga. Bundesliga 2, yes, FC Kaiserslautern in 2007, and with the idea was probably to be promoted with that club in the next few years whenever that club would be promoted, if it would have got there, but it didn't pan out. It was a little more difficult than expected, but that's when he found his European club doing. After the disappointment of Kaiserslautern, Patrice Bernier finds himself with FC Nordsjælland in Norway and has become, outside of the Montreal Impact, is the club that he played for the most. 76 apparition, 3 goals. He was voted player of the year by the supporters of that club in 2010. He scored in the UEFA Cup second qualifier round match versus his Scottish club, Queen of the South, Dumfries. He actually scored the winning goal and his first goal for the 2010 season on that day, which was November 14, 2010. Patrice Bernier did score in what would become the Europa League. You do have some great moment for him with this club, FC Nordsjælland, in Norway, and that really became his European destination, and the one club we could say he really became a legend for that one.
Sure. Yeah. And look, coming through those not Norwegian, pardon me, Scandinavian. I don't know why I said Norwegian. Scandinavian clubs was something that back in that era there were actually a fair amount of Canadians that were doing okay in Scandinavia. We're seeing less and less of that. There used to be a lot of Americans back then that used to go through the Scandinavian route too. It's kind of gone by the wayside in recent years. Not too entirely sure why again, but Patrice was one of those folks. You mentioned Rob Friend, and he kind of back in the day was tied in a little bit with his career and his career path. Now, Rob Friend ended up catching on with Mönchengladbach, back when Mönchengladbach were a D2 or B2 team, and did quite well there. And sort of because Patrice had some injury issues in the middle part of his career, I think that really was what derailed his European adventure a little bit more than pure talent. Because what we saw when he got back to North America in 2012, and I'm sure you'll get there in a second. When we saw that, he really did excel and set himself up. The injuries again, though, were a big part of the story for him last decade, and really unfortunate because a lot of us in the Canadian soccer always wondered how high Patrice could have went. We really feel like, especially the German part of that experience there. I really feel that had he been able to stay healthy and get some consistent playing time in the B2, that we might have seen him make that jump to the Bundesliga, like we saw Rob Friend, again, the guy that I tie into his career a little bit just because they went over at the same time in the same club. You might have seen him excel in the same way at a club similar to what Friend was at. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to do that. And again, injuries playing a major role. But there's always a blessing in disguise, right? Like, not to, sound like your grandmother after you skinned your knee or lost a big game, but there's always a reason, everything happens for a reason. And the reason in Patrice Bernier's case was to get him back home, where obviously he jumped out.
Yeah, no, 2012, it was announced in December 2011 that Patrice Bernier will be back in Montreal for the Montreal Impact for their inaugural season in Major League Soccer. Back to 2012, 8 assists, 4 game-winning assists, tied for second in Major League Soccer, awarded the Giuseppe Saputo Trophy, given to the Impact Most Valuable Player after leading the team with 9 goals, including 6 on penalty kicks, tied for 4th all-time in MLS history for most goals from the penalty spot in one season. Patrice Bernier, if you go back to 2012, we were all surprised by his offensive contribution, and it would be on and off story of scoring depending on which year and what type of role he's asked to have. But in 2012, remember that Bernier stutter step penalty? That was amazing. That was fun to see. We saw it many times in 2012. It wasn't necessarily a fun season, but it wasn't as difficult maybe as this year if you go back to looking at some games in 2012. I have a lot of memories of Patrice Bernier in 2012, but that stutter step penalty and the amount of time we saw it be effective in 2012 and the years after, this is what I remember from his early tenure in MLS, his offensive contribution, the way he sent those through balls and launched teammates, and that stutter step.
Fair enough. And he was in many ways in the infamous game, which unfortunately for Patrice, he ended up on the wrong side of the result in the end. But in that infamous series with Toronto last year, I thought he might have been maybe the best player on the pitch for both teams in parts of that game. Certainly for the Impact, I think he was the MVP of that tie, and had the Impact gotten through to an MLS Cup final, who knows, because they were a little healthier, I think, in the end at key positions than TFC was at the end of that. But alas, we know the result of that, and I don't want to dwell on the fact that he wasn't able to get that result. What I want to talk about is how well he played in those 2-game series. And that's, I think, at that age, he was 37 at the time, it made everyone he seemed like the ageless wonder. And even this year, there was some rumblings in the middle of the year that maybe he would continue and maybe they would convince him to play a little bit longer.
All the rumblings came from Zambrano saying to Patrice when he was called up for the Gold Cup, Patrice, how about you stay next year too? Like, come on, help me with the young guys next year. But that's maybe something for the future when Patrice becomes a manager or coach, which is in the books and the plans for next year. We talked about 2012. Let's talk about 2013, his second season in Major League Soccer. Finished tied for first in Major League Soccer with 5 game-winning assists, third with 4 goals from penalty kicks, tied for 11th in the league and tied for first on the Impact with 8 assists. Registered personal best in MLS with 31 games played, 28 starts, and 2,474 minutes, recording 4 goals and 8 assists. Started the MLS All-Star Game against AS Roma, selected 3 times to the MLSsoccer.com Team of the Week and twice by the fan as the Videotron Player of the Game. Also helped the team win the Amway Canadian Championship, starting all 4 games in the tournament. Played 2 CONCACAF Champions League games, including 1 start. That's 2013 for Patrice.
Fair enough. Yes, and look, I'll just let you continue on with the MLS highlights there, but there's no doubt that Piatti's probably maybe in most casual fans' minds the name that does jump out. But I think that if you're a hardcore viewer of Canadian soccer, of the Impact, of MLS even, Patrice Bernier has been always the soul of the heart and soul of the Impact in many ways. It's going to be weird next year to not see the Impact with him. Of course, he'll remain with the club in a capacity teaching kids, and I think that probably is a great thing for the future of that club and for Canadian soccer too. I'm sure that Zambrano will bring him in some capacity too at the national team in a similar way that he's had Julian de Guzman hanging around. And it's kind of nice to see those 2 guys that are of the same era again, of that era that I spoke of a minute ago, which really, there was some disappointment with that on a Canadian national team level for both Patrice, because again, the injuries sort of got him out of the national team call-up cycles for a while, and that was always something that frustrated a lot of voyageurs, a lot of national team fans, is they were clamoring to have Patrice come back in, and there was a period in time where that was, you could go to the Voyageurs board and see 5 threads about what the hell are they thinking not bringing Patrice in, and that's I think something that we wish we could go back with the time machine and change, but we can't, of course. But that generation had some disappointments at the World Cup qualifying sort of situation. We all know 2008 and that cycle and how disastrous it was. Well, 2010. The 2008 is when the cycle was happening, when the games were happening, I should say.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a disaster. And that was sort of for a while how we thought of that generation. But in Patrice's case, he's come through and really played that great leadership role in establishing the beachhead of Major League Soccer in Montreal, and has come back to the national team program and played a great role with the young kids, just like Julian in a different way has managed to reframe his career for amongst Voyageurs Canadian national team fans. Patrice is doing the same thing. So hopefully we'll see him in a national team role very quickly, because I do think there's a lot to give there, and that's my memories of Patrice are around Canada more than the Impact in many ways. So that's why I bring it up. But I'll let you continue with the next year of Major League Soccer.
2014, his 3rd season for the Impact in Major League Soccer. In his 2nd stint with the club, named the 2nd team captain in the Impact's MLS history on February 13th after the departure of Davy Arnaud. Tallied 3 assists in 26 regular season games, including 20 starts and 1,802 minutes. Named to the MLSsoccer.com Team of the Week for Week 8 and selected once as the Videotron Player of the Game. Helped the team win a 2nd consecutive Amway Canadian Championship, recording 1 goal and 2 assists in 4 starts. This championship is the one that led to the Montreal Impact run, so that Voyageurs Cup is really important in my mind, and probably in his as well, in his career. Started 2 of 3 CONCACAF Champions League group stage games, also scored 1 goal in 3 MLS Reserve League starts, coming back from injuries, and won any time. That's when, back in the day, when MLS Reserve League was something. Signed a new contract with the Impact on December 11th. That is the tenure of Frank Klopas that started in that year as well, and there was some controversy in 2015 and some parts of 2014 whenever he was not necessarily getting the playtime that people were wanting him to have, the fans especially. Patrice has always been a fan favorite because of his honesty, transparency. He was transparent before transparent was a thing, before it was cool. Patrice was just being himself, just being classy man all the way through, in good times and bad times. Patrice never shied away, never ran, was always present. And there was some tough times in 2014, but at least that Voyageurs Cup win by the Impact would lead to a very interesting 2015.
Yeah, look, in hindsight, it's almost, and we were doing this show, well, a different name, but we were doing this show basically at that time, and I remember having lots of conversations about Patrice Bernier's playing time and about whether or not he should be getting more or not, and it legitimately, because he's 36, or was he 36 or 35? 36, I
It was
think.
35,
Anyway.
turning 36 a year after, but yeah, it was in that range.
He's mid-30s at any rate, so like it's a legitimate question at that point, and I think a lot of us felt at the time again that it might be done, that the writing was on the wall, that he would probably be retiring at the end of the year because of that playing time. But of course, then Klopas goes, and suddenly Biella steps in, and he starts to get time on the pitch again. This is a little later on in this narrative, but it just seems like almost surreal to think back on those conversations, because it really was a major talking point, and realize how much more he still had to give. Couple more years. I've been talking about Patrice Bernier likely retiring for 3 years now, and he kept just plugging along, and here he goes. And as I mentioned, if you wanted to go another, had Canada somehow qualified for the World Cup, he'd be going another year.
Oh, yeah. No, that's for sure. He would be like, yeah, that's for sure he would try. Let's go to 2015, which is for me, like, if you're a player, and I had those conversations with Patrice, another Montreal Impact player, back then in Mexico and after and before, like, how important is it? Like, dude, you're playing Club America and Estadio Azteca. It's like, at the end of your career, it's those moments that you go back to. So I imagine this weekend when we talked to Patrice on Sunday, that moment, that event in Mexico City and in Montreal, that CONCACAF Champions League final of 2015, I think will come back for sure as a moment that he remembers. But played 4 games in the knockout stage of the CONCACAF Champions League and helped the team reach the final against Mexican giant Club America, recording 1 assist. Registered 1 assist in 20 regular season games, including 6 starts. Reached 100 career MLS games on October 3rd in Orlando. Started the knockout round game against Toronto and both Eastern Conference semifinal games against Columbus, recording 1 game-winning goal and 1 assist against TFC. Also started 2 away Canadian Championship games. This was the Didier Drogba time and the playoff run, the first playoff run of the history of the Montreal Impact, where actually performed well. We remember in 2013, and they're tromping in Houston. In 2015, they started to learn how to win in cup situations in the CONCACAF Champions League and as well in the playoff. But 2016 brings us to the Eastern Conference. That home and away series, I think, by Patrice Bernier, Montreal-Toronto, is probably his highlights of his career, though. Like, I imagine that will come up as well on Sunday. But in 2016, recorded 1 assist in 20 regular season games, including 13 starts and 1,185 minutes. Started 1 Amway Canadian Championship game. Started all 5 MLS Cup playoffs games for the Impact, registering 2 assists. But it's not just about the assists, it's how he was dictating the play, creating this space for a Piatti to be effective, for a Mancosu to be effective, who took over basically Drogba's job at that point. Also started the international game against AS Roma on August 3rd at Stade Saputo.
Yeah, and look, I mentioned earlier, everything happens for a reason. I guess the one reason that Montreal fails out of the playoffs, and it's going to have some blessing in disguise, is it will allow Sonny to be all about him, which he does deserve. Kevin, we're not going to dwell on this because, as you say, other media is doing so, but there was something about Patrice in playoff games that always allowed him, or cup games, that allowed him to step up and take his game to a different level. And I know that he always credited that to sort of having that hockey understanding and hockey knowledge in him, right? So again, not to dwell on it, but Patrice did play elite hockey.
Yes, Patrice played hockey. He played in the Q. He played for Val-d'Or. He played with Steve Bégin and Roberto Luongo back then, yes. But
but more to the point, I think it just allowed him to understand playoffs in a way that
it's knowing how to like up your game a level, right?
Yeah.
There's your normal day-to-day game where Patrice always played almost the best of himself. But then there's dipping in that energy source and trying to go into overgear or whatever analogy you want to use, but giving your 110%. That famous playoff 10%.
Yeah. And I remember him talking about that last year, and that's why I brought it up here. But it's certainly something that was key to his game, and it's unfortunate that we don't get to see one last playoff run in him, because that would have been something, and that is obviously the fairy tale that most Impact fans envisioned back in March. They wanted to see Patrice go out holding the MLS Cup up aloft. Alas, that wasn't in the cards, but certainly a lot of highlights. You mentioned the Club America, that would be right up there. I'm sure, as a guy that has shown a great commitment to the Canadian national team, seeing those crowds in particular in the two games against, between Montreal and Toronto last year would have been something that I could imagine, as, having been around in the early 2000s and, just as a fan, being like overwhelmed by seeing close to 100,000 people over 2 weeks watching two Canadian teams play a soccer game. I imagine, as a guy that was involved deeply in the game, that must have been really something lovely for them to accept and be part of. And, again, it didn't get to the end, but he got there's two moments. I'm sure when Montreal scored the third goal in the first leg against Toronto and had that 3-0 lead.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's a moment right then that he will go back in his mind and be part of again, and the excitement and the noise in that building, and also a moment that you and I were there together with, when Montreal scored the goal in the Big O in the final of the CCL. Wow.
Yeah.
That was something that I've never heard a stadium louder in my life. And
that broke my mic. Like, that moment broke a microphone. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but the level of decibel at that peak, it was peaking too. Like, it started, and then it peaked, and like, oh, jeez. Like, my ears are never going to be the same again.
I think that's the acoustics of the building, right? Like, 'cause it's rising up, right? It's nuts. Like, you can't describe it. Like, when you've been in noise like that. And, like, I've been to an NFL game, not to go back too off kilter here, but I've been to an NFL game before, which is loud, but it's a different kind of loud. Like, that sort of, like, guttural roar loud is what I'm talking about. I've never seen something like that in my life. So at any rate, that, I'm sure, in his mind will be things that will be going through. Two Danish Cups as well. The Voyageurs Cups he's won too. So I'm sure that there'll be moments like that throughout. And soccer is a game that unlike a lot of sports out there, I think that a lot of players don't have the same understanding that they're going to win championships. You talk about when a hockey player retires, they always go, oh, well, it's sad he didn't win a Stanley Cup. Yeah. I don't think it's quite the same with soccer, because it has so many multiple levels that the competition happens on. There's so many clubs out there that just understand that they're never going to win a title, and there's different things that they measure, and that's one of the things I love about the sport, that it's not all just about the top team in the end. It's about a lot of different things that happen in any given season, and that sort of journey and adventure and the narrative that happens along with it. So there's no shame in the fact that Patrice Bernier doesn't have, a major trophy in his honors section on Wikipedia. I think that there's a lot of honors that went along with Patrice Bernier's career, regardless of that.
No, exactly. Like, just quickly, we won a few Canadian Championship with the Impact, got himself in Eastern Conference Finals, a CONCACAF Champions League Finals, and in Cup situation in Europe. And we've seen him, like, not necessarily winning trophies in Europe, but he won a few Canadian Championship. He, as a player, as a soccer player, if we want to put a number to it, it's a small percentage that actually wins trophies. We forget this sometimes because of our different way here, because we highlight those big teams that wins all the time, and we always see those trophy on TV. To be a player and to raise a trophy is actually a minority, a very slim minority.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's even factoring in the fact that there's parallel competitions in pretty much, literally in every soccer league in the world, there's parallel competition. You at least have a cup competition along with your league competition. Look, yeah, and Patrice accomplished something that very, very few, even fewer players do, and that he has become synonymous with a club that he's a legend at a club. That, of course, being the Impact, and so few players do that. Like, even great players don't necessarily become that attached to a brand and something that he'll have forever. And I mean, that's a different sort of criteria. Like, you'll look at, Danny Dichio, for instance, is synonymous with TFC now, and that's something he never would have predicted at the start of his career. But for Patrice, it's even more special because it's his hometown, and it's his home province and everything else. And for, a Montreal son, a French Canadian son to come back home, a Quebecois son to come back home and be able to do what he did for the Impact, that's dreamland stuff that he couldn't have imagined having happened when he was a young boy, because it wasn't possible then. So it really is a unique career that way, and a career to celebrate, and something that we will celebrate on Sunday. I wonder, Kevin, I'm curious how they're going to approach this game, particularly at the end, because the game doesn't mean anything really, right?
It truly doesn't. No, because you're playing New England, two teams that are eliminated from the playoffs, and really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, so how much will they be trying to, maybe put an extra pass in to get Patrice an attempt on goal? Like, how I remember watching Jamie Carragher's last game for Liverpool, and Carragher was a guy, I think, that only scored like 3 or 4 goals in his entire career, and it was quite obvious what happened in the game, how badly they were trying to get him a goal.
We'll see. If you see Patrice Bernier being, I don't know, coming in the second half and being put as a striker for 10 minutes, maybe really tried to get him a goal.
Yeah, well, yeah, Carragher actually hit the crossbar.
You know what it reminds me of? Lou Pasaglia, who was a kicker in the CFL for decades, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
When he retired, they put him at quarterback and did a QB sneak, so he has a touchdown in his stat sheet.
Yeah, I do actually. How long did he play? It was like
about 40 years or something. He was
because he was a kicker, so he was like 48 when he retired.
Yeah, exactly. No. I'm sorry, Patrice. I did not intend to compare you to Lou Pasaglia, but Patrice, I don't know, if you put him at striker maybe for 10 minutes at the end of the game, and maybe, I don't know, tell New England players, guys, doesn't mean anything. Your stats are already terrible. Just get out of the way. Just let him score.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Yeah, I mean, why not? It should be about stuff if the
come
game
on, a penalty. Go see
not.
the ref. Ref, call a penalty so we see the stutter step one time. One more time. Come on. And Piatti, you better let Patrice shoot that penalty.
Oh, yeah. If there's a penalty, it absolutely is Bernier's penalty to take. And if Piatti takes it, boo him. Come on,
boo. Boo, Nacho. Let Patrice stutter.
Yes, that is absolutely what should happen in that particular case, because he deserves the victory lap. And you look, at least he has this. And come on, I hope Montreal, I don't know, if do you expect it to be close to a sellout or a sellout on Sunday? I know there's not a lot going on, but
I truly hope so. I don't know right now. I haven't checked Ticketmaster as of this morning, but hopefully there's a good turnout. Hopefully it's nice and kind of warm on Sunday.
Let's be honest, there's not a lot to cheer about in Montreal sports right now. And I
nothing.
Don't even say that to be too big. There just really isn't.
Montreal sports terrible. It's embarrassing. But come on, support Patrice on Sunday,
which is something to do and something to look forward to. So yeah, great player, class act to something that I think we've all said many times before. He's everyone's captain, because he was Canada's too, but he is mostly he is Canada's. He is a part of us, but he is more a part of Montreal. So we give you the last word on Patrice's career. What will you take away from Patrice Bernier and his impact, forgive that pun, for one last time in his career on Montreal soccer?
Represented always his club with dignity, with honor, on and off the pitch. Work ethic that would actually give you the blueprint of how to become professional. A discipline and dedication that is and will always will be, a dedication to the type of man that he is. And that is something way more than just an athlete. An athlete is something. But to be the type of man that Patrice is a goal that we should all have. And no, he's not dead. No, it's not a eulogy. It's just a thank you for being you, for just doing things the way you always did, and showing some people how to deal in good situation, bad situation, and just being a model on how to handle yourself. And this has always been an honor for myself to interact with Patrice Bernier, and I'm looking forward for one last time to be part of the Patrice Bernier Scrum on Sunday.
All right, fair enough. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll briefly look at the games of the week.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And Duane, it's decision day on Sunday. And MLS, and there's not but there's not a lot of decisions actually happen on Sunday. That's the thing. And the only really big thing at stake, and there's maybe one playoff spot at stake on Sunday, and that will be in the Western Conference. Who of San Jose and FC Dallas will get that spot? Right now it's San Jose because of their amount of wins. They got 12 wins, 43 points. FC Dallas 10 win, 43 points as well. But San Jose's differential is minus 22. That's terrible, but they can't be caught by Dallas, at least for the amount of wins. But Salt Lake has got 42 points. Salt Lake can squeeze in, and their amount of wins is 10. So San Jose's got a tiebreaker on them. So, yeah, it's one of those three teams will be in the playoffs. But the way it stands right now, maybe San Jose's got the biggest advantage. Let's see who they are facing, and that's what I meant by advantage. San Jose is playing at home against Minnesota United. They have a chance to seal the playoff spot. FC Dallas at home against LA Galaxy, and Real Salt Lake at home as well against Sporting Kansas City. I do feel San Jose will get that playoff spot.
Look, Dallas is in many ways the negative story of the season. They were co-Supporters Shield favorites at the start of the year, I would have to say. I think most people either pick Dallas or Toronto to win the Shield. For them to be battling for a playoff spot on the final weekend, we all still have that hunch in our head if they make it in that we still think of Dallas the last few years, but at some point you have to realize maybe they are what they are, and this is just a team that peaked last year and unfortunately couldn't replicate it this year for them, and here we are. Obviously, there's other battles to go on, quote unquote, decision day, brought to you by AT&T. There's your corporate reference. Vancouver Portland is the biggest game that probably will get the most attention, but I do think that the story is whether Dallas is eliminated, because again, you have a team that was at the very least, I think, co-favorites at the start of the year, possibly being eliminated before the playoffs. That is significant, and that is MLS, and that's what they love and what they want. They want that unpredictability. Not great. Not if you're Dallas, you don't want that unpredictability, but we'll see. I don't even know, like, from a fan perspective, I kind of almost want Dallas in rather than San Jose. No disrespect to San Jose, other than
no
the fact
offense, Goonies. No offense.
Yeah, I just never think of San Jose, and that's maybe if you're in the West, you might a little bit more, but they are, along with Colorado, perhaps the most anonymous team in this league. So we'll see. And that goal differential situation I don't think they're a very good football team, and I don't think they would put much of a opposition up against whoever they end up drawing. That is kind of what's going to happen on decision day. Is we're working the seeds out, and I'm not going to pretend to get as pumped up about that. Once I know the playoff brackets, then sure, I'm going to get excited, and we're going to be particularly excited to watch those knockout games next week. But in the meantime, just wake me up when it's done, because the Supporters Shield battle is over. It wasn't a battle this year, but the Supporters Shield race is over.
The Supporters Shield race has been over for like months. But Seattle could squeeze in. You mentioned Vancouver, Portland. They're basically playing. If Vancouver wins, Vancouver finishes top of the Western Conference. If Portland wins, they could potentially finish top of the Western Conference. Well, they would, for the amount of wins. If Vancouver and Portland draws, Seattle can maybe squeeze in, but Vancouver would get the tiebreaker there because of the amount of wins again. But so Vancouver's got a good chance of finishing first in the West.
Well, they just have to get the job done, is what they have to do, Kevin.
Yeah, at home against Portland. So you would think it's in the realm of possibilities. Actually, it's on the road. Sorry, at Portland.
Yeah, well, that makes it less likely, but yes.
Makes it a
Look,
lot less likely, actually. Like a lot less.
yeah, MLS is pretty well. Quickly, just we're talking around the corners here. We'll spell it out here. Right now, heading into the final week, you have Vancouver on 52, Portland on 50, Seattle on 50, SKC on 49, Houston on 47, and then there's that's basically that battle royale there. Houston with the win with 50 points could jump up a couple positions. There's home field at risk there. Seattle could drop. They could go up. They could get a bye. So there are things to play for sure. And the thing about winning the Western Conference, when it's not the Shield attached to it as well, is that it really doesn't. First and second really isn't a lot of difference there. So if you're a Whitecaps fan out there, and of course a lot of you would be, what you just want, a draw would be fine too, right? Like you could probably slip up, and a draw would likely get it done for you because of the win difference, as you say. 15 wins, Vancouver top of the league. So they just really need to get a result in Portland, and hopefully hold on to one of those two. I think that the chances of having Vancouver slip out of a top two, the way Vancouver slips out of the top two and has to play a knockout game is by losing to Portland, because then they do slip to second regardless. They lose, Seattle wins, they're going to be third. That's Vancouver's worst case scenario. But it all gets very complicated when it's just messed up here. Like Houston could technically get a bye in this. I don't know how that exactly would work, but it would be a tough slug. On the East, again, Toronto, forget about them. They're playing for basically pride and to win that record, to get the record for points in a season. That's the only thing they're really playing for, and it doesn't really matter, From a TFC, I'll say this outright, from a TFC, as much as it'd be like somehow symbolic and kind of fulfilling for the worst team in the world, quote unquote, in 2012 to break the MLS all-time points record, that would be, fun for TFC fans. It really doesn't matter. Staying healthy matters. I don't particularly. I wish it wasn't Atlanta they were playing because of Atlanta's hot finish, but at the same time, Toronto can beat Atlanta, and if you really do view them as a competitive team, I said I wasn't going to talk about TFC, then I talk about TFC. At any rate, if they could beat them and Columbus gets the win, then suddenly Atlanta is looking at a road playoff game where they're not nearly as good as they are at home, and maybe you get rid of them that way, and you're not having to worry about them in a series against you. And I think Toronto could motivate themselves that way.
My opinion is always just stay the course. You get injured when you trying to do something different. You get injured when you try not to get injured, right? You get injured when you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to play my best players, and guess what? They're fine. They're gonna slip down the stairs and injure themselves or something. Best way, I think, is just let them do what they do, and maybe reduce a little bit of playing time. But you just stay the course. You just continue to do things how you really do usually. And that's how you don't get injured, is when you don't try to deviate from what you actually usually do. It's when you get out of your routine that for some reason you do movement that you're not used to. You try to not run full clip, so you run a little differently and you pull something. It's always when you try not to get injured that you usually injure yourself. Yeah.
All right. So 1st and 6th, they're set. Toronto will finish 1st. New York will finish, the Red Bulls will finish 6th. The 2 through 5, any combination can happen. NYCFC on 56, Chicago on 55, Atlanta on 54, Columbus on 53. It's really pointless to try and figure out based on results, because you're going to confuse yourself, because again, that's just sort of like they're in a, obviously the teams with more points right now have the advantage, but when you're 53, 54, 55, 56, anything can happen there, and they're on 16, 15, 16, 16 wins. So Atlanta actually has the least amount of wins of all of those. They need to beat TFC if they have any chance of moving up this weekend. The rest of them are going to fight it out. We'll see what happens with the Crew game in terms of the mess around that, and it's still there has been some suggestion that a lot of the pressure out there might be starting.
Don't go on Twitter. Like, come on, don't go on Twitter and read everything and just it's a mess now. Like, between Anthony Precourt and Meredith Paulson in public in front of Twitter, it's becoming a mess. And then you read the replies. Why did I read the comments? Why did I do that to myself?
I don't think MLS thought they would get the pushback that they did on this. because there's a lot
vile.
of MLS
Like, it's
head office
vile.
are made up by guys that a lot of them came from NFL, and NFL move teams all the time in relative fashion compared to other leagues, right? And they get pushback, but they don't really worry about it because they're a juggernaut, right? I think that it's the type of pushback they're getting. I am increasingly believing that sometime quietly in the next couple of weeks that Major League Soccer is going to go to pre-court and say, yeah, you're selling the team to us.
What did I tell you 2 days ago? That's like what I told you. It's when I saw the term used, rogue. Go back and go in North America professional league history of sports. Doesn't matter which sports. Whenever an owner turns out that he's against everybody else, guess what happens? He's asked to either sell the team or they find a way to get someone to buy him or hostile takeover, whatever the case may be. You see it happen all the time. And I wouldn't be surprised if Precourt Sports Ventures and after Precourt in the next few months or a year.
PSV, by the way.
That's know,
when
right?
I was reading the press release. That's why I tripped up on that.
PSV. What?
PSV? What are we talking about here?
No. Not the team that plays in the Eredivisie and was quite good in the late 80s. No. We're talking about Precourt Sports Ventures. I wouldn't be surprised at all, like you, if, in the next few years, we have a new ownership group that we're going to promise to keep the team in Columbus for real this time.
Yeah, this is the MLS. Yeah, I think that they want to save face with them. They want to put that power. We can do this if we need to out there. But I think behind the scenes, again, with the pushback and all those yellow avatars that are out there, and we'll see. There's going to be banners in 3 or 4 supporter sections this weekend. This is supposed to be decision day. This is, I suspect, what really irritates them the most. This is supposed to be one of their sponsored days, one of the days that all the attention is on the results in the field. And instead, we're going to have commentators on games dancing around this issue of why there are people wearing yellow in their stands or why there are banners about Columbus in the games that don't involve Columbus, because if they're league partners, they're probably going to be told not to talk about that. But how do you avoid it, right? And that's taking attention away from where MLS wants it, and that is what's going to pee them off the most. So I think that this is going to – I think Crew fans, if you're listening out there, I understand you're still going to be stressed about this, and my words don't mean anything, but I think it's going to work out based on the pressure that's happening. And I think fans should take credit for that a little bit to put this pressure on, but they need to keep doing it. And, I put a tweet out earlier this week that I think that a very simple way, if you want to show support for Columbus this weekend and you have a home game, is to just put a little yellow on your scarf, a little yellow on your outfit. You can wear a whole yellow thing if you want, but some little bit of yellow on you would just be a very simple and subtle way, without being, overtly political about it or whatever, that you can support this cause. If you want to make a banner and, wear full, paint your face, Columbus Crew yellow, go ahead. But
you don't have to. But no, exactly. And I have a suggestion as well. And to finish the show, let's bookend it, Duane. At the 8th minute at Stade Saputo this Sunday, hopefully, you get up and you sing with the supporters. Patrice Bernier. And across the league, I have a utopian dream. Please get up at the 8th minute across MLS, across the world of soccer, football, calcio, football, whatever you call it. At the 8th minute, get up and sing. Farewell, my captain, Patrice Bernier. And until next week, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeart Radio, and anywhere you get your podcast.